Trapped in the Vampire King's fortress for a single night, she expects a monster, but finds a ruler burdened by curses and loneliness. As danger closes in, one night of forced closeness turns into an unbreakable bond, and by dawn their hearts and their fate are no longer separate. I used to think monsters were loud. I learned the most dangerous ones are silent, and the kindest ones hide their kindness like a wound. The storm found me on the mountain road, soaking my coat until it felt like I was wearing river water. Wind snapped the trees and shoved fog across the path in thick waves, so the world became only two things: my shaking breath and the dark shape ahead that wasn't a cliff. It was a castle, perched like a shadow that had learned how to stand. I didn't come to this place for adventure. I came because my younger brother's last letter ended with a single sentence that wouldn't leave my mind. If I don't return, don't trust the men in silver. I followed rumors and broken trails for 3 days, telling myself I was brave, pretending I didn't feel the fear tightening around my ribs. When the storm cut the road behind me, I realized courage is often just a choice you make after you've run out of safer options. The gates were already open, just enough to make it feel like someone had been expecting me. Inside, the courtyard smelled of wet stone and old roses, and the torches burned with a steady blue flame that didn't flicker in the wind. Every footstep echoed too loudly, as if the castle was listening and repeating my presence back to me. I called out once, my voice thin in the cold, and got only the sound of rain answering. Then I heard its soft movement above, like fabric brushing stone. I looked up and saw him on a balcony, still as a statue, watching as though he'd been watching for a long time. He was tall, pale, and dressed in a dark coat that looked too elegant for a night like this. His hair was white blonde, loose at his shoulders, and his eyes held the kind of calm you see in people who have already survived what others are terrified of. I expected hunger in that gaze. I expected triumph. Instead, I saw something that made my throat tighten for reasons I couldn't name: restraint. "You're bleeding," he said quietly. I touched my forehead and felt a cut I hadn't noticed, a warm line beneath the rain. The shame of it rose fast, my body betraying me in front of the one creature everyone warned me about. I stepped back, searching for a weapon, for a plan, for anything that made sense. He didn't move closer. That was the first unnatural thing he did. "I'm not here to harm you," he said, like the words cost him something. "But if you stay in the open, the storm won't be what kills you." The way he said kills you wasn't a threat. It sounded like an old fear, his fear, not mine. I should have run. I should have listened to every story told in taverns and whispered by mothers to frighten children into bed. But the mountain wind slammed into me again, stealing air from my lungs, and behind me the darkness beyond the gates shifted. I caught a glimpse of movement, figures in the fog, not quite human in the way they held themselves, circling like they didn't want the castle, they wanted what the castle had just let inside. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. "Who are they?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. He finally descended the stairs into the courtyard, each step unhurried. Up close, he looked even less like a beast and more like a king who had forgotten how to be a man. His skin was cool-toned like moonlight, and yet there was warmth in the way he positioned himself, slightly between me and the gate, as if his body was an answer to a question I hadn't asked. "The men in silver," he said. My stomach dropped. My brother's warning burned in my mind like a brand. "You know about them." "I know what they take," he replied. He lifted one hand, palm open, not reaching for me, showing me he wasn't armed. "Come inside now." A howl rose from the fog, not an animal's howl, something sharper, like a scream pulled tight into a thread. The figures at the gate pressed closer, and the blue torches flared as if the castle itself recognized danger. My legs moved before my pride could argue. I ran past him into the wide hall, and the doors shut behind us with a deep, final sound that made my skin prickle. Inside, the warmth hit me like a memory. Candlelight pooled along the floor, reflecting in mirrors so tall they looked like frozen windows. The air smelled of cedar and smoke, and beneath it a faint sweetness I didn't want to name. I stared at the closed doors, hearing muffled impacts from outside, hands, weapons, something striking wood and iron. I turned back to him, breathing hard. "If they're here for me, why help me?" My voice came out angrier than I meant, because fear always borrows anger when it needs a disguise. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the fireplace and placed his hand near the flame without flinching, as if heat was another kind of punishment he'd learned to endure. Because I once refused to help someone, he said at last, and I have spent centuries paying for that refusal. The words landed heavier than they should have. Centuries, so the stories were true. I forced myself to hold his gaze. What do you want from me? For a moment, his expression tightened, so fast it almost didn't happen. It wasn't hunger, it was grief sharpened into discipline. He reached into his coat and withdrew something small and delicate, a silver pendant on a chain, dented like it had been struck against stone. My breath caught. I knew that pendant. I'd seen it around my brother's neck 100 times. My hands lifted without permission. Where did you get that? I whispered. The Vampire King looked at the pendant, then at me, and his voice softened in a way that made my chest ache with dread. Well, he left it here, he said, and he begged me to keep you safe. The hall seemed to tilt. The storm pounded the windows. Outside, the men in silver struck the doors again and again, and somewhere deep in the castle, a bell began to ring, slow, warning, ancient. I couldn't breathe. You knew my brothers. He stepped closer, just enough for me to feel the cold of him in the air between us, and his eyes held a terrible kindness, like he'd been carrying bad news in his mouth for days. I know your name, he said, and I know why the castle opened for you tonight. I swallowed, fighting panic. I never told you my name. He lowered his voice until it was almost a confession. Mira, he said, if you don't trust me in the next minute, you won't survive until dawn. And as he spoke, the locked doors behind us cracked with a sound like splitting stone. The front doors gave a sharp, snapping groan, like the castle itself was trying not to cry out. A thin line of light split the seam, cold, gray stormlight, and the blue torches along the hall shuddered as if they were breathing in fear. The Vampire King moved before I did. Not with panic, not with fury, but with a quiet certainty that made my pulse stutter. He stepped in front of me, shoulders squared, and for the first time I noticed how careful he'd been to keep space between us until danger arrived. Then he closed that distance without hesitation, like protection was an instinct he hated but couldn't deny. Stay behind me, he said, voice low, and whatever they say, do not answer them. Another strike hit the doors, wood splintered, metal screamed, the sound rolled through the hall and into my bones. I wanted to argue. I wanted to demand my brother back, demand explanations, demand the truth. But the truth was already here, trying to break its way inside. The doors burst inward with a rush of wind and rain. Figures in pale cloaks poured through, boots splashing on the stone. Their faces were hidden behind silver masks that reflected the torchlight in sharp, unfriendly angles. Each of them carried something that glittered: chains, rods, narrow blades that looked less like weapons and more like tools. A hunter's. The one in front lifted a lantern that burned with white fire. It didn't flicker, it didn't warm the room, it just judged everything it touched. There she is, the leader said, voice muffled by the mask. The girl the castle opened for. I tried to step forward, but the Vampire King's arm rose slightly, an unspoken boundary. It wasn't rough, it wasn't controlling. It was the same gesture you used to keep someone from stepping into a fast river. You've come onto my land, the king said. He didn't raise his voice, yet the hall seemed to bend around his words. Leave. The leader laughed once, dry and confident. You don't get to command us anymore, Night King, not while you're starving and trapped behind old vows. The phrase hit me, old vows. The king's jaw tightened just barely. And then I saw it, not anger but restraint so practiced it looked like calm. The hunters spread out, forming a half circle. One of them raised a silver chain and flicked it like a whip, testing the air. Another lifted a crossbow-like device, but it didn't hold a bolt. It held something small and bright, like a shard of moonlight. I realized what they expected. They expected the king to attack. They expected a monster so they could call themselves heroes. Instead, the Vampire King exhaled slowly. He lowered his hands, palms open, as if he were unarmed and uninterested in fighting. I will not spill blood in my hall, he said. The leader's lantern tilted toward me, bathing my face in that harsh white glow. Then give us the girl. My stomach clenched. Why? I demanded before I could stop myself. The king's head turned slightly, not a glare, almost a warning. Don't answer them, but it was too late. I'd spoken and the hunters had what they wanted, proof that I was human, afraid, and real. The leader stepped forward. Because she belongs to the morning, and you belong to the night that's finally ending. A hunter to the right lifted the device and fired. The vampire king moved faster than thought, not toward them, toward me. He turned his shoulder to shield me, and the shard struck him with a sharp, ringing click. He didn't cry out, but his body jolted as if the impact wasn't just physical. For a heartbeat, the air smelled like metal in winter. My chest seized your head. He didn't look at the wound. He kept his eyes on the hunters. Enough, he said, and this time the word carried weight, like the castle itself recognized it as law. The blue torchlight surged. Shadows along the walls stretched and lifted, not like claws, not like horror, like curtains drawn by invisible hands. The darkness pooled at the hunter's feet and rose in smooth, controlled waves, wrapping around ankles and wrists, tightening just enough to hold them still. No snapping bones, no screaming, just sudden, helpless stillness. The hunters struggled, and their silver tools clattered to the floor. I stared. I'd expected brutality. I'd expected revenge. What I saw was restraint so deliberate it felt like mercy with teeth. The leader, still free, raised the lantern higher. The white flame flared, and the shadows around his soldiers recoiled like they'd been burned. You can't hold us forever, the leader said, voice almost pleased. Not with her here. The king's eyes narrowed. What did you do? The leader's head tilted. We brought you a message. He reached into his cloak and produced a small object, a ribbon of dark fabric tied around a ring. I recognized it with a sick lurch. My brother used to wear that ring on a cord around his neck when we were children, before he pretended he didn't care about sentimental things. The hall went very quiet inside me. My fear condensed into something colder. The leader's voice softened, almost kindly, which somehow made it worse. Your brother is alive, Myra, for now. He asked us to give you this in case you tried to hide behind a king who can't even face the dawn. My throat tightened around my next words. Where is he? The vampire king's hand flexed at his side, a controlled tremor. I could see it now, pain he was pretending not to feel. That shard of silver light in his shoulder was no ordinary weapon. The leader took a step closer. Come with us before sunrise, or we leave him for the day. The meaning was clear enough that I felt dizzy. Not a threat of blades or cruelty, something colder, something clinical, the kind of threat people make when they believe they're righteous. My body leaned forward, desperation rising like a wave. Take me, just don't. The vampire king's voice cut through mine. No. It wasn't shouted, it was final. He turned his head slightly toward me, and for the first time his calm broke, revealing something raw underneath. They want you to walk out so they don't have to enter again, he said quietly. They want you alone, frightened and willing to believe anything. But my brothers... I know, he said, and there was grief in it, familiar and heavy. And they know you will trade your life for his without thinking. The leader watched us with a patient cruelty that didn't need violence to be effective. You have 1 hour, Myra. The mountain road is clear now. We'll be waiting at the old chapel. He tossed the ring toward me. It landed at my feet with a soft clink that sounded too loud. Then he backed away, and his men, still half bound by shadow, retreated with him, dragging their feet as if the castle itself resisted letting them go. The leader lifted the lantern one last time, shining it on the vampire king's face. Oh, you used to be terrifying, he said. Now you're just sentimental. When they disappeared into the storm, the doors swung inward with the wind and slammed shut again. The blue flames steadied. The hall stayed standing. But something had cracked anyway. I stared at the ring on the floor, not trusting my legs to move. My hands were shaking. The Vampire King turned away from the doors, and I finally saw what he'd hidden. The weapon lodged near his shoulder, a pale shard humming faintly as if it hated his skin. His breathing was controlled, but his posture was just a fraction too stiff. "You're hurt," I whispered. "It's nothing," he lied immediately, like he was used to saying it. I bent to pick up the ring, and my fingertips brushed cold metal. My brother's ring, proof that this was real, proof that the world could reach in and steal the people you loved and then use love like a leash. When I looked up, the Vampire King was already walking deeper into the castle, one hand pressed lightly over the wound, as if pressure could keep pain from becoming visible. "Wait," I said and followed him, anger finally breaking through my fear. "You told me not to answer them, you told me to trust you, but you won't tell me the truth. What are they? What are you? What am I to them?" He stopped beside the fireplace again, as if warmth was the only honest thing in the room. For a long moment he didn't speak. The silence felt like a closed door. Then he reached up and with slow care grasped the shard. The moment his fingers touched it, his face tightened, pain flashed through his eyes like lightning behind clouds. He pulled it free in one controlled motion and let it fall into the fire. The flame hissed and flared white for a second, then returned to orange. He exhaled once, deep and measured, like someone who just swallowed a scream. I took a step closer before fear could stop me. "Sit down." Well, he looked at me as if the suggestion didn't make sense. "Sit," I repeated, firmer. "You can pretend you're fine later. Right now you're bleeding, yes, bleeding, and you stood between me and them." His gaze held mine, unreadable. Then, slowly, he lowered himself onto the stone edge of the hearth. The movement cost him more than he wanted to show. I tore a strip from the hem of my damp shirt, ignoring the cold, and pressed it gently against his shoulder. I expected him to flinch away from my touch. Instead, he went still, as if he didn't know what to do with kindness offered without fear. "Oh, you don't heal like you should," I said softly. "Silver doesn't let me," he replied. The words were flat, but the truth behind them was tired. "It reminds my body what it's supposed to be afraid of." I swallowed. "Then why didn't you kill them? You could have." His eyes lowered to my hands, holding the cloth in place. "Because I know what it is to be hunted," he said, "and I know what it does to the soul when you become the thing you hate just to survive." The fire popped quietly. Outside, thunder rolled away like something retreating. I tightened the cloth and tried to steady my voice. "You know my brother." "Oh, yes. And you knew my name before I said it." He nodded once. "He spoke of you as if you were the last light he trusted." My throat burned. "Then tell me where he is." A pause. His humility came not as softness but as honesty. "I don't know," he admitted. "Not anymore." That answer should have made me furious. Instead, it made me terrified in a different way, because it meant my brother wasn't simply lost in the woods. He was inside a war I didn't understand. The Vampire King reached into his coat and withdrew a folded piece of paper, edges worn like it had been opened too many times. He held it out to me. "Oh, this is what he left," he said. "Not the pendant, not the ring, this." I hesitated, then took it with careful hands. The handwriting was my brother's, slanted and familiar, like his voice trapped in ink. "Mira," it began, "if you're reading this, then the king did what I begged him to do. He chose mercy again. Please believe me, this matters." My eyes blurred. I blinked hard and kept reading, heart pounding. "The men in silver aren't saviors. They don't want safety. They want control. They think the night should be ruled by fear and the morning should be ruled by obedience. They will use you because you can open what they cannot." I looked up sharply. "Open what?" The Vampire King's expression darkened, not with menace but with dread. "The oldest door in this castle," he said quietly, "the one even I cannot unlock." My grip tightened on the letter. Why would I be able to unlock it? He didn't answer immediately. He reached out and touched the pendant at my neck, the one he'd shown me earlier, without actually touching my skin, stopping just short as if he were afraid of crossing another line. Because the castle recognized you, he said, and because your brother wasn't the first to come here carrying your family's blood. A cold realization crawled up my spine. My family. The Vampire King's voice dropped to something almost reverent. There is a lineage that doesn't belong fully to day or night, he said. People who can walk into places sealed by vows and curses, not by force, by right. I stared at him, my mind struggling to keep up. The storm outside felt farther away now, as if the real danger had moved inward. I glanced back down at the letter, and the last lines hit like a blow I wasn't ready for. He will protect you even when he shouldn't. That's his curse and his gift. But Myra, if they force you to choose, remember this. Sometimes love isn't sacrifice. Sometimes love is staying alive. My breath shook. The Vampire King watched me read, and something in his face, something lonely and ancient, made my chest ache. What's behind that door? I asked. He held my gaze, and the answer he gave wasn't a storybook one. It was the truth of someone who had carried consequences for too long. The reason I became king, he said, and the reason I no longer deserve the crown. Before I could ask more, the castle bell rang again, deeper this time, urgent. Not a warning from outside. A warning from within. Somewhere beneath our feet, a lock clicked open, slow and deliberate, like a giant inhaling. The Vampire King rose too quickly, pain flashing across his features. His eyes snapped to the floor, then to the dark corridor beyond the hall. I sealed that door, he whispered, and for the first time his voice carried fear. No one should be able to. A faint sound drifted up from below, threading through the stone like a voice through water. Not a hunter's voice. Not the storm's. My brother's. Myra, it called, soft and unmistakable. I'm down here. I froze, every instinct screaming at once. Hope, terror, longing, suspicion. The Vampire King's head turned toward me slowly, as if he were afraid of what he'd see on my face. Oh, that isn't possible, he said. But the voice came again, closer this time, and the castle lights dimmed as if they were bowing to it. Myra, my brother whispered from beneath the floor. Please don't trust him. The voice came again, sliding through the floorboards like a hand under a door. It sounded exactly like my brother on winter mornings, half asleep, trying to be brave so I wouldn't worry. Oh, please don't trust him. My knees went weak because hope is not a gentle feeling. Hope is sharp. It digs in and refuses to let go. The Vampire King didn't move toward me or grab my arm. He just stood there, pale in the firelight, looking as stunned as I felt. That isn't his voice, he said, but his words carried no pride, only fear. It's wearing his voice. I swallowed hard and stared at the stone floor as if I could see through it. Or you're lying, I whispered, hating myself for saying it, because the worst part was how reasonable it sounded. If my brother was calling me, what kind of sister hesitates? The king's shoulders lowered, like he accepted the accusation as something he deserved. You have every right to doubt me, he said quietly. If you go down there, I won't stop you, I won't command you, I won't force your trust. That restraint hit me harder than any threat could have. Monsters don't offer choices, they take them. Outside, the storm had eased into a distant roar, but inside the castle the air felt newly unsettled, as if something beneath us had shifted its weight. The blue torches along the walls dimmed a fraction, and for a second the hall smelled like cold earth after rain, like a place that had been sealed too long. I clenched my fist around my brother's ring until the edges bit into my skin. If it's not him, then prove it, I said. My voice trembled, but I held on. Ask him something only he would know. The king's eyes met mine. You ask, he said, not me. I drew in a breath that felt too small for my chest. Then I leaned down toward the stone as if the floor were an ear. Yea, I called softly, using the nickname only I used when we were alone. What did you say to me the night you left home? There was a pause long enough for my heart to start breaking. Then the voice returned, faint but quick, like it had been waiting for the right key. I said I'd bring you back the sunrise in a jar. My throat tightened. That was real. That was him. He used to say ridiculous things when he wanted to hide fear behind humor. He said it with a grin that didn't fool me, and I'd pretended it did because we were both trying to survive the goodbye. My eyes burned. Behind me, the vampire king exhaled slowly, as if the answer had cut him too. An echo can remember, he murmured. My brother's voice rose again, closer now, urgent. Myra, listen, he can't be what he seems. He's trapped you. He needs you to open something. Don't. Stop, I snapped, half to the voice, half to myself. If you're really my brother, tell me what you hid under the loose step by the kitchen door. Another pause. This time the answer came wrong, almost right, but not quite. A knife, the voice said. I went still. My brother hadn't hidden a knife. He'd hidden a little tin of sugar cubes, stolen from town to make our tea sweet when money was tight. It had been his private rebellion against hard days. My stomach dropped as if the castle had shifted beneath me. The vampire king watched my face change, and the softest flicker of relief crossed his eyes. Not relief that he was right, but relief that I wouldn't walk into a trap blind. It knows the shape of him, he said, not the heart of him. The voice surged with anger now, less like my brother and more like a cold wind trying to sound human. Myra, he's done this before. He'll take your light and leave you empty. The king's jaw tightened at that, a wound reopening behind his calm. Yes, he said, and his honesty made the room feel smaller. I have done unforgivable things, not to you, not tonight, but in my past, yes. My hands shook around the ring. Then why should I follow you anywhere? He looked at me for a long moment, as if choosing every word with care. Because you came here for your brother, he said, and I, whether I deserve it or not, intend to help you bring him back. He reached into his coat and drew out an old iron key, heavy and dark, etched with a symbol that looked like a crescent broken in two. He placed it in my palm and closed my fingers around it without touching my skin. This opens every door in this castle, he said, including the one out. If you decide I'm the danger, you can leave. The key felt cold and real, too real for a trick. I stared down at it, then back at him, searching for the catch. There is one place it won't open, he added, voice quieter, the door beneath us. The castle bell rang once, low, impatient, like the underworld tapping its foot. My brother's voice drifted up again, now almost pleading. Myra, come alone, please, he can't cross the threshold, he's afraid. The vampire king's eyes narrowed, a flash of something ancient behind them. That's a lie, he said, and there was a strange sadness in it. I can cross it, I'm just afraid of what I might find. That fear made him feel more human than any heartbeat could have. I tightened my grip on the key. Then we go together, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. If there's a trap, I won't be bait. If there's truth, I won't face it alone. He studied me as if he'd forgotten what courage looked like up close. Then he gave a single nod like a vow. He led me past the grand hall into a narrower corridor where the air grew colder with every step. The stone walls sweated with damp, and the torchlight shifted from blue to a softer amber, as if even the flames were tired down here. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped in a slow rhythm that sounded like a patient countdown. We reached a stairwell hidden behind a tapestry, an old woven scene of a sun rising over a forest. The threads faded as if time had tried to erase the dawn. The vampire king pulled it aside, revealing steps spiraling downward into blackness. The voice from below hummed with satisfaction. That's it, it whispered. Come closer. I set my foot on the first step. The stone was slick and cold, like it had never known warmth. As we descended, the castle above seemed to fade. The air thickened until each breath felt like wading through water. My skin prickled with the feeling of being watched, not by eyes but by memory. And beneath it all, the scent of roses returned, stronger now, almost painful, as if something sweet had been trapped with something rotten for too long. The vampire king didn't walk ahead like a captor. He kept pace beside me, slightly behind, letting me choose the speed, letting me stop when my courage needed a second to catch up. I need to know your name, I said suddenly, because I couldn't bear calling him king-like. That made him untouchable. He hesitated. A name is intimate, he said. It's a thread. In my world, threads become chains. I'm not trying to chain you, I replied. I'm trying to understand who's standing next to me. For a moment, the only sound was the drip of water and the soft friction of our steps. Then he spoke. Lucien, he said, as if the name had dust on it. Before the crown, before the curse. Lucien, I repeated, and the name felt strangely gentle in my mouth. At the bottom of the stairs, we reached a door unlike any other, taller than the hall above, carved from black stone that swallowed light. Its surface was etched with symbols that looked less like decoration and more like warnings. There was no handle, no keyhole, only a shallow groove in the shape of a hand. Lucien stopped so abruptly I nearly bumped into him. His face had gone still, the way people look when they stand at the edge of something they promised themselves they'd never return to. I sealed it, he said, barely audible. Not with iron, not with magic, with my word. The voice below the door, my brother's voice, wearing impatience now, coiled through the seam. Mira, put your hand on it, you can save me. I lifted my palm without thinking. Lucien didn't grab me, he didn't order me. He simply said with a strained tenderness, if you touch that door, it will recognize you, and if it recognizes you, it will never forget you. I froze, hand hovering. What is it? I asked. Lucien's throat worked as if the answer hurt to hold. A place where bargains were made, he said, where people traded pieces of themselves for what they wanted most. My heart pounded. Did you? Yes, he admitted, and the shame in that single word was so naked it made my anger wobble. I wanted peace for my kingdom. I wanted my people to stop dying, and I believed for one foolish moment that the right sacrifice could buy a clean future. I lowered my hand, and what did it cost you? Lucien's eyes flicked to the groove shaped like a hand, everything that made me think I deserved mercy. The door pulsed just once, as if it had heard its name. Behind us, far above, a faint thud echoed through the stairwell. Then another, boots on stone, metal clicking softly. The men in silver were inside the castle again. Lucien's head snapped toward the stairs, listening. The muscles in his jaw tightened, and I felt the shift in him, the king waking up not as a predator but as a protector. They found another way in, he said. My mouth went dry. Then we have to hurry. The voice below the door softened, almost tender again. Mira, please. I stared at the hand-shaped groove, at the dark stone that seemed to drink the torchlight. My brother's ring burned cold in my fist. I thought of the sugar cubes hidden under the step, of laughter that didn't belong to any curse, of love that shouldn't be used like a rope. I made a choice I didn't feel ready for. I'm not opening it for a voice, I said, and my voice shook but didn't break. I'm opening it for my brother. I pressed my palm into the groove. The stone was colder than winter. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the groove warmed beneath my skin, as if the door had recognized me the way a lock recognizes its key. A soft, deep click sounded from within, and a thin line of darkness became an opening. The air that poured out wasn't just cold. It was old. It smelled like sealed books and extinguished candles and roses left too long in a vase. Lucien stepped closer, eyes locked on the widening seam. Mira, he said, and there was a plea in his voice he didn't dress up as authority. If you feel it pulling at you, if you feel it offering you what you want, tell me. Don't hide it, that's how it wins. Before I could answer, the door opened wide enough to reveal a descending passage lit by a faint glow, neither torch nor moonlight. And from deep within that passage, my brother's voice came again, clearer than ever, almost at my shoulder. But this time it didn't plead. It laughed softly and said, "Good, now bring the king to me." Lucien went perfectly still. as if every century of his life had just lined up into a single, terrible memory. "Oh, that," he whispered, "is not your brother." And behind us, the stairwell filled with the cold shine of a white lantern as the men in silver finally reached the bottom step.